Justice requires embodying oneness. So just a few days ago was the 75th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz. More than 1 million people were murdered in that Nazi death camp. Perhaps one of the most famous and even poetic perspectives on that blight on both human history and on the human condition. One of the best written, I believe, perspectives goes like this. First, they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. And then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me. Those words adorn a wall at the United States Holocaust Museum. In fact, that wall is the exact moment when I first really connected to those words, that confession, some 20 years ago. Those words, that confession, was written by Reverend Martin Niemöller, a German Lutheran pastor and theologian. I'm always curious. I'm always curious to hear other people's stories about their understanding of that confession. Curious to hear what they walk away from it with. And I'm sure that each of their stories have ultimately had an influence on what I walk away from it with. Well, what it speaks to me is about our illusion of separateness. The way I see it, the greatest majority of the things that are damaging in our world, the things that most major religions would call a sin, are rooted deeply in the false narrative that we are separate from each other. You know, even in our trying to help others, we gently and subtly hint at our inability to wrap our heads around our oneness, our sameness. To put it more plainly, and I'd argue in a more profound way, as you've already heard, Ramana Maharishi, that's who spoke this the first time, once was asked by someone, how are we to treat others? And, you know, in my little notes here, it says to ask y'all, does anyone know the answer to that? Someone's already jumped the gun on that for me. So now you know the answer to how are we supposed to treat others is there are no others. There are no others. For many folks, what they take from Niemöller's quote is the need to seek justice, whether or not you think you will benefit from that justice. As in, but I did not speak because I was not a socialist. And I don't deny that there is a clear call to practice justice at all times in that confession. And for others, it contains an implicit message that in doing nothing, we are complicit in the outcome. I'd like to share something with you that at first it might feel like it's a bit of a change of directions, but ultimately it's not. It's something that I wrote on MLK Day this year, and I've continued to work on it a bit since, and it goes like this. James Earl Ray did not kill Martin Luther King. That shot from his Remington rifle did not kill Martin Luther King. Hate killed Martin Luther King. Classism killed Martin Luther King. Racism killed Martin Luther King. Capitalism killed Martin Luther King. The indifference and privilege of white privilege in America killed Dr. King. James Earl Ray, the shot from his rifle, they are nothing more than an increasingly whitewashed symptom of the grievous and self-important realities that killed Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Do not hear me say, however, that that bullet did not rip through the Reverend's jaw spine. It most certainly did. Do not hear me say that James Earl Ray did not pull that trigger. He most assuredly did. I am simply asking you, asking me, to consider the role we played, the role we continue to play in pulling that trigger. Now, I'm not asking you to feel guilty. I'm not asking you to prove me wrong. I am not asking you to suffer shame. I'm asking you to do something. I'm asking you to do something about it. Do something about the classism, racism, capitalism, indifference, and white privilege that killed him. Because they do to this day, they continue to kill him. He may have a new face. He may have a new name. He may have a new gender. But they kill him again, again, and again. I do not ask you this on behalf of him. I do not have the place to do that. I do not ask this of you with any call on any particular religious precept. After all, while he was a Christian minister himself, Christianity both played a role in his death and contained those who celebrated his demise. I ask this of you, I ask this of me, because it's the right thing to do. And the time is always right to do what is right. I ask this because I have seen what the course of doing nothing, doing not enough about it, I have seen the course of what that has done. I do not want my children to have to live in that miserable reality. I do not want to force them to fight the battles that my ancestors and I have created. I do not want my friends to keep dying because of classism, racism, capitalism, indifference, and white privilege. It's selfish of me. I know. But frankly, I don't care if it's selfish. Because it's humane. It recognizes the individual dignity and value of all people. It recognizes their value. So please do something. Do something about it, because doing nothing is unthinkable. Those are my thoughts on MLK Day, and as I looked back on them, I could not help but think that the doing something I was speaking of is the impetus to serving up justice. Serving up justice, you see, isn't just saying when one person suffers, we all suffer. When one person is hungry, society is hungry. When one person is threatened, humanity is threatened. When the reality of the oneness, the connectedness of creation does mean these things, and it does, it also means that there are no others. But simply knowing those things, understanding those things, confirming and confessing those things is not and never will be the same as doing something about them. Doing justice. Now, it's important to recognize that there are many ways to do justice. It can look as grandiose as doing the difficult work of dismantling political, social, and economic systems that are designed to keep the least of these in their place. But as the English writer, poet, and moralist Samuel Johnson once wrote, those who wait to do a great deal of good at once will never do anything. So also, keep in mind That doing justice can look like something as simple as using your place of privilege as a hearing aid rather than a microphone. That is to say, rather than rushing to speak out loudly against injustice because your place of privilege allows you to do so. And instead, be purposeful. Be purposeful about listening to the least, the last, and the left out, because you understand that your being given a place of privilege is as much of a charade as the idea that they are somehow less than. Today, however, I'd like to talk about taking justice just a step further. It may be that it isn't so much as taking this step further as it is about doing justice more fully. I'd like to have us begin thinking about embodying solidarity. A few weeks ago, I joined a group of religiously affiliated political do-gooders up in Iowa as the Iowa primary debates and caucus were closing in. And the group is called Vote Common Good. Now, for full transparency, from time to time, I play a very small role with the organization. And at any rate, particularly with the upcoming presidential elections, I encourage you to start following them on social media and be a part of the discussion about voting for the candidates that will do the most good for the most people. Here's a shameless plug. Just go to votecommongood.com and learn more. So anyway, my friend Charles Torrey and I were there representing our organization, the Christian Left. Check us out at thechristianleft.org. Follow us on Facebook. Shameless plug. It was an honor. It was an honor to be there, to be present alongside, to be presenters alongside of people like a former White House press secretary, the current executive of the Dietrich Bonhoeffer Foundation in D.C., and even, yes, the nuns on the bus. Yes. I got to meet them. They were amazing. But I have to say that the presentation that most directly hit me square between the eyes came from Dr. Larisha Hawkins. Does anyone recognize that name? See, Dr. Hawkins made news in 2015 when for Advent she decided to live into one of the core concepts that she taught about as a professor. The concept is embodying solidarity. And for her personal observance of Advent, she made a simple, loving, embodying decision to wear a hijab as a symbol, as a symbolic gesture of support for Muslims during a time when we were seeing a rise in Islamophobia growing here in the U.S. She made a social media post about her decision, and part of that post read like this: I stand in religious solidarity with Muslims because they, like me, a Christian, are a people of the book. And as Pope Francis stated last week, we worship the same God. Well, because of this simple act of embodying solidarity, Dr. Hawkins, the first black woman to receive tenure at the conservative Christian University of Wheaton College, was, at least from my perspective, given no other choice but to step down from her position. I'd like to read to you part of the Washington Post coverage of the story. The article is entitled, "The Professor Wore a Hijab in Solidarity, Then Lost Her Job." It's written by Ruth Graham. And in that article, Graham explains the concept of embodied solidarity for Christians, she explains it this way. The concept starts with inspiration from Catholic school teaching, the labor movement, the Eucharist, which Christians consume bread as the body of Christ, and Imago Dei, the idea that humans are created in the image of God. Hawkins wanted to take solidarity past its popular use to do-gooders. Tweeting and check writing are cheap gestures, she says. Short-term aid vacations to developing countries, she says, are poverty porn. Now, I'll just say here that I think all of these can be good things as long as they don't end up in a place where we're thinking that they are the extent of justice. Graham continues saying, true solidarity, Hawking was becoming to believe, involves physical risk and sustained labor. It also involves recognizing that structural inequality is a kind of violence with physical effects on its victims. Graham reported that in the interview, Hawkins referred to a passage in the book of Luke in which Jesus' followers failed to recognize him after his resurrection. Hawkins then says, my question is, who do we not have eyes to see? That's the question that plagues my soul, she says. Who am I not seeing suffering? What entire groups of people, humans, do I not see suffering? I can't help but believe it's a question that all of us who identify as justice seekers should be asking constantly. Who am I not seeing? It should, as Hawkins puts it, plague our souls. What groups of humans do I not see suffering? And then embodying solidarity means to go a step beyond seeing those who are suffering. And embodying solidarity is to put yourself in a place that you might experience and begin to understand, to some degree, their suffering. Now, do not hear me implying here or suggesting that redemptive suffering is good. I am merely suggesting that it can be important in reframing our understanding of a particular people's struggles. As I sat and listened to Dr. Hawkins, and as I watched the documentary about her, which is simply called Same God, I was struck by a pesky question that would not leave me alone, and it will not leave me alone to this. To truly be justice. Can I truly embody justice if I do not stand with those suffering? Can I truly stand with those suffering if I do not ultimately know something of their suffering? And can I truly know something of their suffering if I do not experience something of their suffering? As I ask these questions, I try to remain fully aware, as Dr. Hawkins says, that an embodied solidarity costs, but it's worth it. I also try to remain fully aware, as Dr. Hawkins says, that suffering with requires our entire bodies. She says, suffering from a distance is not solidarity. Theoretical solidarity is not solidarity at all. If I am to take seriously the spiritual understanding of oneness, if I am to take seriously the concept that there is no other, if I am to take seriously the concept that when one suffers, we all suffer, might I be called? Might I be required to suffer with? If you are a Christian or following into the teachings of Jesus, you certainly have been given an example of embodying suffering, embodying solidarity, embodying oneness. If I am to take seriously the concept of true justice, might I be called? Might I be required to suffer with? It's a difficult question. It's a difficult question and a pesky question. I'm not saying I have an answer yet, but I do sort of feel like I'm leaning towards one. As I said in my MLK Day musings, I'm not asking you to feel guilty. I am not asking you to prove me wrong. I'm not asking you to even suffer shame. But I am asking you to consider that suffering from a distance is not solidarity. That theoretical solidarity is not solidarity at all. What does acknowledging our oneness, our connectedness, what does it really, truly need to look like? Well, for the next few weeks, we'll be considering this. We continue next week with a message that will be entitled Sawubona. If you don't know what it means, you can go look it up and get an idea where we're going. And it'll conclude on a Wednesday night in a few weeks as we invite our surrounding community to come join us in a meal and a viewing of the documentary Same God about Dr. Hawkins. I hope you'll join us for each of them as we wrestle with the question, does true justice require embodied oneness?